We still have a lot of people logging in, but I think it's time we should go ahead and get started. So I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're located at. And I know you're all very busy, so I appreciate you sitting down with me to discuss this topic that we're going over today, which is understanding the deprecation of the US survey foot. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. My name is Mario, and I'm a Senior Solution Specialist here at Microdesk. And I'm a senior consultant with expert knowledge in assisting organizations with implementing building information modeling technologies and processes in their design workflows. I also work closely with Microdesk's sales team to ensure that we deliver the most beneficial and effective implementation solutions to our clients. This involves providing technical support, training, product evaluations, recommendations, on-site services, and standards developments. I have extensive experience in many of today's leading BIM technologies, including Civil 3D, InfraWorks, Map 3D, and 3ds Max. Before we get going, I'd like to talk a little bit about our company Microdesk, if you're not familiar with us. So Microdesk was founded in 1994 as an Autodesk reseller with one simple mission: to assist architecture, engineering, construction owners, and GIS firms with improving workflows and integrating project technologies. 25 years later, that mission still holds true. Microdesk is a well-established AECO consulting firm with 13 offices in the US and the UK. We have over 230 AECO consultants, solution specialists, and software developers that can help you in all sectors, all disciplines, and all stages. We were also recently acquired by Symmetry, which makes us now the largest Autodesk channel partner in the world. Some of the hottest topics in the AECO world are globalization, urbanization, and sustainability. Urbanization studies suggest that the US will build 114 cities the size of Boston within the next 30 years. Here at Microdesk, we can help to make sure that you're prepared to meet these demands. We use software from industry leaders and combine it with our vision and our passion for sustainability to meet the demands of urbanization. Our team of industry experts, consultants, are redefining project delivery and asset management. We partner with world leaders such as Autodesk and IBM to utilize innovative technologies and methodologies to empower sustainable design and overcome local challenges. Our vision is to reduce environmental impact of urbanization by helping the AECO industry in design, construction, and operating better projects more efficiently by leveraging the full potential of BIM, VDC, and asset management. We're committed to helping clients realize the business benefits of BIM quickly and economically by facilitating the use of innovative technologies and processes. Whether it's streamlining your design, construction, or operations, our consulting team is the nation's largest and most experienced group in the AECO technology consulting professionals. Microdesk clients represent some of the nation's largest and most respected organizations and public agencies, including the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, Denver Airport, Robert A.M. Stern, and Columbia University, among others. To help support the industry with these demands of urbanization, we provide full service consulting. This includes building information modeling services, enterprise strategy and workflow assessments, technology management, mentoring and support, as well as application and development. Today's agenda is we're going to be talking about this big elephant in the room, the deprecation of the US survey foot. We want to kind of give you an overview of what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means to you. And then I'm going to go through several different locations where you're going to need to be doing some updates to your current software and hardware as well. So we'll be looking at updating your Civil 3D templates, what needs to be done in your styles and settings for your annotation, updating your survey equipment, updating your Civil 3D survey database settings, as well as how to manage and update your current files. I'm also going to provide a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So the reason we're here today, the deprecation of the US survey foot. So this is not anything new, as you can see right at the top of the screen. This notice was actually released back in October of 2020. And so it's been out there. But the reason we're all here today and it's become such a hot topic is because it's actually being implemented at the end of the year. So in about a month and a half from now. So I'm going to read you the actual word for word kind of cliff note summarization of the notification that was released. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the National Geodetic Survey, National Ocean Services, and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration have taken collaborative action to provide national uniformity in the measurement of length. This notice announces the final decision to deprecate use of the US survey foot on December 31st, 2022. Beginning in January 1st of 2023, the US survey foot should not be used and will be superseded by the international foot definition. The international foot definition is equated by 1 foot equaling 0.3048 meters exactly in all applications. The international foot is currently used throughout the US for a large majority of applications and is typically referred to as simply the foot. Over time, this terminology will become more prevalent in land surveying and mapping communities. Either the term foot or international foot may be used as required for clarity in technical applications. So that's the release. That's why we're here today. And it is going to be implemented coming up really quick on us. But we have known about this for about 2 years now. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, as I was doing some research in preparation for this presentation, I found a lot of different websites that had various information. And some of them referred to the deprecation of the US survey foot. Some of them referred to it as the depreciation of the US survey foot. And then some just refer to it as an obsolete feature. So I just wanted to spend a moment and just kind of add some clarity to that. So the deprecation, the definition of that means it's something that's still in use, however, only for historical purposes and will be removed in the future. The depreciation definition is a monetary value of something that is decreased over time. And then obsolete is something that's no longer in use and has been replaced by another method. So all of these words actually kind of fit and facilitate our topic. They all play some kind of a part, so none are actually wrong. It's just the wording and the phrasing, and who knows, maybe even some of these websites had a typo and stuck an extra I in there, or maybe our buddy autocomplete jumped in and retyped the word, who knows. But I feel that all these forms actually are relevant to what we're discussing today. I also found it kind of amusing that if you actually go to dictionary.com, it defines deprecation as the act or process of expressing earnest disapproval. Any omission represented only a lack of information rather than a bias against the deprecation of an omitted product. And I found that kind of amusing because there are mixed opinions on this topic, and some people are kind of set in their ways and maybe aren't so happy about this, and they probably are expressing an earnest disapproval. So I found that kind of amusing. Another thing I found, if you kind of read down through the various definitions, they actually had another entry and they related it to computers, but I felt that it was a little more fitting to what we were talking about today. So it said, the act or process of no longer supporting the use of a function, value, or feature in software, but not removing the capability immediately, so as to allow continued compatibility for a period of time. So I felt that was pretty relevant and a pretty good description as well. But the actual release that came from the Federal Register did have it listed as the deprecation. All right, just wanted to clear that up for you. So let's talk about this a little bit. So first of all, what's the difference? Well, the international foot is actually shorter than the US survey foot. So the difference is about 1/100th of a foot for every mile. And you can look at the actual values there. An international foot is 0.3048 meters, where a US survey foot is 0.34800609601. So if you're going to that extent, you will notice that difference to that many decimal places. And that may not seem like much, but you got to remember, this is being used in surveying when they're surveying very large projects. And a lot of times, if they're in a certain coordinate system, they may be miles and miles from its origin. So you can very easily get out of whack very quickly, depending upon where you're at in the world. So who uses the US survey foot? Well, surveyors use it primarily, and 40 of the United States have committed to using the US survey foot. 6 use the international foot, and then others are undeclared. And what's kind of funny about that is that's actually kind of a gray area, because even the ones that say they use one or use another, they're not fully committed to using one versus the other. Some states may use US survey foot for local projects, where they might use the international foot for statewide projects or military projects or airports, things like that. So it is really kind of a gray area. It's getting tossed back and forth, and nobody's fully vested. Well, very few are fully vested in one form of measurement. So why is this happening? And I've talked about this a little bit right at the beginning. First of all, this was approved by Congress, and they're the ones that are providing that ability to push that out to the public and make it an official notice, an official policy. The notice that was released from the Office of Standard Weights and Measurements has been placed out, and we're now following that. We need to adhere to that. Again, the implementation of this is beginning very soon, a month and a half from now. So starting at the top of the year. And finally, the US survey foot was always meant to be temporary. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but yeah, it was never meant to be used for all applications, and it was never meant to be used full term going forward. I found a couple nice little graphics over at NOAA and NGS website that I felt that were very useful and added a little bit of information to this topic. And if you look at the image on the left-hand side, you can see that's the state of Arizona, and it's showing you the difference between the US survey foot and the international foot as you survey across the state. And you can see, as you start getting more north, you can have a difference of over 5 feet, depending upon which form of measurement you happen to have used. And if one person uses one where another person on that team is using another, they're going to be very different. They're going to have very different results. Things are not going to line up. The graphic on the right shows the primary unit that most of the states are using. And as I mentioned before, it's what they're primarily using, because again, some of these have listed that they use one, but they only use it for certain aspects, not necessarily everything. So let's do a quick little brief history. I'm not going to go all the way back. We actually go all the way back to 1600 at the beginning of this topic, but quick little overview, just kind of where we're at and how we got to this point. So first of all, in 1866, the Congress legalized the use of the metric system. By 1893, the Mendenhall Order declared that the foot be defined by the meter. So we are actually metric. 1 foot is equal to 12 over 3937 meters. In 1901, the National Bureau of Standards was actually created. In 1933, the International Foot definition was adopted by ANSI. And again, that same formula applies. 1 foot equals 0.3048 meters. By 1959, the National Bureau of Standards adopted the International Foot for everything. Well, with one exception. The only exception was geodetic surveys. For geodetic surveys, they will retain the original measurement. And so they renamed that one to the US survey foot. So now going forward from 1959 on, that's when we started supporting 2 forms of the foot. But they did put a little cliff note in there. And at the end of it, it did say, until such a time as it becomes desirable and expedient to readjust the basic geodetic survey network in the United States, after which the ratio of a yard equal to 0.9144 meters shall then apply. And that's kind of where we're at today. We've finally come full circle, and we're implementing that now. By 1977, the National Geodetic Survey goes entirely metric for NAT 83. In 1988, it was actually proposed to make the US survey foot permanent, but that didn't happen. By 1990, the reinstatement that metric would be used in the US was actually applied. In 1998, NAT 83 was released. And by 2016, the NSRS legislation declared that both the International Foot and the US survey foot in state plane coordinate systems, which of course is perpetuating the problem because now we have actual official coordinate systems that are in 2 different units. Well, so why are we going through this big effort? Why are we making this change? Well, for one, it's too confusing to maintain 2 forms of measurement of the same unit. For 2, the national standards for weights and measures are authorized by Congress, and they're the ones pushing this out and kind of making this a standard. And in the United States Constitution, it actually states that the Congress shall have power to the coin and fix the standards of weights and measures. Well, the US survey foot was only meant, as I think I mentioned this a moment ago, was actually only meant to be used for geodetic surveys. So it was never meant for engineering or any other types. The US survey foot was actually only meant to be used as a local form of measurement. So again, if you're measuring at a assumed coordinate at a local control point, the US survey foot applied for that. Also, the National Spatial Reference System, the NSRS 2022, are scheduled to be released. Those will be our new coordinate systems going forward. And in the, excuse me, in the NSRS 2022, there will be no option for the US survey foot. However, we will maintain it, or they will maintain it, in the State Plane Coordinate System 83 and 27. So that'll still be in there for those 2. If you end up using those coordinate systems, that will still be an option. So what are the benefits of this? Well, a uniform definition will reduce the costs due to errors. And that, in my opinion, that's probably the biggest one. I've seen in my own experience several scenarios where things didn't work out. Me being an employee at Microdesk, I've been here many years now, and I've had people call me directly or call our tech support lines and say, I did all my design, maybe in Civil 3D, and the surveyor did all their work, and we're bringing it in, and things don't line up. Why is that? And a lot of times it's because, well, the engineer used a foot or a international foot, where the surveyor used a US survey foot for their database. And now the content's not lining up. And if it gets found later on down the road, now you're gonna have to reprocess that survey data or do your design, move things around. And it can be very timely, very costly. That's the biggest thing, in my opinion. Another nice thing is there'll be no more of us having to maintain records of which unit was used for each project. Well, it'll also avoid confusion determining which foot is the right foot to use for your project. It'll give us a consistent form of measurement across all states. As I showed you in that graphic previously, a lot of those states use different units. And if you're on the East Coast, a lot of those smaller states are very close to each other. And if a project or a property crosses the state line, it's very possible that it actually changes different units. And that can be very much a problem. Also, software and firmware developers can now all design in the same units. And also international companies, a lot of them don't even know that we have two forms of a foot. And so they may just grab whichever one is the default. And if they ever work on US projects, a lot of times they don't know which one to use, even if they do know that there's two. So a couple things I want to clarify real quick before we get too deep into any of the software and settings and things. So first of all, we are metric. Don't fool yourself. We may annotate our plans in decimal units or feet and inches, but as you saw from some of those formulas I showed earlier, our foot, the foot that we use, is a fraction, a equation of the meter. If the meter were to be redefined tomorrow, the foot would change too. It is based on the meter. We are actually in metric. And then the foot is the international foot, okay? So if you see anything, again, whether it's being your software or whatever it may be, that says foot, it's talking about the international foot. The only time it's a US survey foot is when it clearly says this is a US survey foot. So if you're in another software and you go into your units, your settings, it says foot, just know that you're actually using the international foot at that time. Keep in mind that this change is really going to apply to land-based projects. So primarily GIS, surveying, civil engineering. So if you're using any other products like Revit, Inventor, Plant 3D, there'll be nothing for you to change there. Just selecting foot from the units, that's going to be your only option. You'll be in international feet, and everything's going to work fine going forward. The only other caveat to that, besides, again, AutoCAD and Civil 3D, is you might want to keep an eye on your recap and your InfoWorks. Those ones are aggregators of data. And so in your recap, obviously, you're going to set your settings. You're going to adjust any drone settings you might be using, make sure that that's working too. And then InfoWorks is going to adopt whatever units are assigned to the files that you've established to build your models. And for that reason, you don't want to set your models to unitless. I know a lot of people like to do that and say, well, I don't want to deal with scaling or translations or anything, so I'm going to leave it at unitless, and everything's going to work out just fine. Well, that's not going to be the case if we start battling which foot we're using, and your models are unitless and you bring them into InfoWorks. There's a good chance they may not line up. So you might want to keep an eye on that as well. So what about calculating area? Well, the Guide for International Systems of Units actually provides formulas for both. But as I mentioned, unless you're measuring across a coordinate system from its origin, that's the only time you're really going to see that difference. If you were to go out and survey your house, your yard, the difference would be so minute it wouldn't even show up. Yeah, nobody needs to go out and rebuild their side yard fence and take 3 inches off their neighbor's yard or anything like that. None of that's going to happen. So it won't impact you that way at all. So as I mentioned, surveyors use survey foot. They use it for geodetic surveys only. Well, at least that was the intention. However, engineers don't. Engineers actually just use foot or international foot. And if you're pretty well versed in Civil 3D, you know that if you go just to the units itself, the option to choose is foot. You actually have to drill down and get into your survey and your conversion import settings to get an option for US survey foot, but the actual file itself is an international foot. The Bureau of Land Management also uses the survey foot, and in polling them, they have no quick response to adopting this. They say they're currently using the US survey foot. They're going to keep using it, and once the new 2022 coordinate systems come out, they'll build a plan to migrate at that point. But for now, going forward, they're going to stay on the US survey foot. Also want to make it known too that current surveys contain an error of tolerance in the equipment as they collect data. So the difference between the US survey foot and the international foot or the foot, if you were to measure just 1 single acre of land, the variation difference is going to be 0.000004. So as I mentioned, you're really not going to see a difference in that. It's only large projects across large coordinate systems. And a lot of the people that were polled, there was actually, after that notice was released, they actually created a website where people could go in and provide feedback and comments about this notification. And a majority of the people that provided feedback were actually very much in favor of this change. As I mentioned, a lot of the things that we're going to get that are of value out of this is, again, clearing up confusion and, unifying everything we do and making things simpler and easier. We also here at Microdesk reached out to some of the local agencies and DOTs that we work closely with to get their opinion on this new change that's being rolled out. And here's some of the things that they came back and said to us. Basically, they said, we're going to continue to do all of our surveys in NAD 83 US foot until the new datums are available. At that point, then they're going to look at going through a transition. All design work will be done in the units that the survey was done in. NAD 83 US foot will become legacy with the ability to convert to the new datums. And then finally, they said that their biggest concern was the plans of mixed datums being submitted. Some survey base plans might sit for years before they actually get into the design phase. So they're going to actually be instituting a new notation for all survey base plan submissions, that the foot basis must be listed with the datum description in the general notes on the survey base plan title sheet. So that might be something that you might run into yourself locally as well. I also reached out to Autodesk to get their official statement on this new change and transition as well. But unfortunately, I didn't hear back in a timely manner. So if I ever get a response on that, I'll make sure I share that and post that to our website or LinkedIn or something so we can all see what their response was. So as I mentioned, the biggest players here, the biggest softwares that we need to focus our attention on are primarily going to be AutoCAD and Civil 3D as it relates to the Autodesk umbrella. So those are the two that I'm going to be focusing on today. Here's some of the things that you'll need to do. So first of all, there's a handful of places where you're going to need to adjust your units in your AutoCAD and Civil 3D. So in your Civil 3D drawing template, you will need to go into your drawing settings. As I mentioned, the drawing unit, the only option is feet, which is an international foot. But just to the right of that, and I'm looking at the graphic on the left, there is an option for conversion. So when you bring files in, do they go to international feet or US survey feet? If they if you select a coordinate system that is based on a US survey feet, it will automatically set that for you and gray it out so it's not an option. So as you continue to use those coordinate systems, that won't be something you can change. But using other coordinate systems, or as the new ones come out, you're definitely going to want to change that to the international foot option. And then also below that, you're going to see two little checkboxes. One of them that says, scale the objects inserted into this drawing. You're going to want to check that. And that will do that little minute conversion for you to scale the objects so that they do come into this, match the units of your current file. Also, Civil 3D is written on top of AutoCAD. It's kind of the foundation of Civil 3D. And so it has a lot of its own system variables as well. So if you check the second box that says, I'd like to set my AutoCAD variables to match these settings, it will handle a lot of that background stuff as well. So you're going to want to check both of those. You're also going to want to just type the command units, the system variable for that. That's going to bring up your AutoCAD units. You want to make sure that you have the right units selected there. And you also want to make sure that you have the right insertion scale unit set there. Make sure it's set to feet and not US survey feet. And then finally, and maybe I'm just I don't know, paranoid and I like to triple and double check, but matching AutoCAD variables and then changing that insertion content should handle most everything. But just as an extra backup safeguard, you may want to type the system variable INS units, insertion units, and it's a command-driven feature, and you can set a value to it. So the right-hand side shows a quick description of the various options that can be set, and setting it to a value of 2 sets it to feet or the international foot, and I'm putting some air quotes in the air right there. If you set it to 21, that's actually US survey foot. So you might want to go in and set that as well for the AutoCAD backend. It's also worth noting too that this is only relatable to the Autodesk products at release of 2017 and going forward. The products 2016 and backwards actually didn't have an option for US survey foot. So there's nothing to change there. And if you were manually creating that content to equate to a US survey foot, obviously that data will have to be manually translated. As for your styles and settings, the good news is once you set all those units that I just showed to you, most of that's going to trickle down into all of your styles. So you won't have to go through your hundreds of styles and change everything. But a couple things to note is, in your annotations, a lot of times we create expressions, and those expressions can have mathematical values, unit settings, or even drawing scale conversions. So you're going to want to go through and review your expressions, make sure everything syncs up and makes sense. You're also going to want to review your command settings. You might be using the out-of-the-box default command settings, or you may have customized those. But if you select any specific command and go into the command settings, as you can see from the graphic on the left, there are options in there for what units to use for that command, as well as what conversion units to use for that command, and you'll need to set those as well. You're also going to want to make sure that any child styles haven't been overwritten to control that. And if that be the case, you might see the little arrows in this child override column, which means there are some other childs or children that have different values from what has been depicted in this dialog box. So you can go and track those ones down and change those as well. Or very easily, if you click on the arrow that appears in here, it'll actually blow out the child override and sync it up to this main dialog box, which might make your life a lot easier. You won't have to go through and chase all those down. And then you're also going to want to go into your land XML settings. So as you're importing and exporting XML data, there are actually units for that as well. So you're going to want to go in and adjust your units to international feet as opposed to survey feet. As for your survey equipment, there's lots and lots of survey equipment out there. Obviously, I can't go through all of that, and they're all going to be slightly different. But if you go to the front end kind of interface of your field equipment, and there's usually either a settings or a configuration button on there you can press, and in there you'll be able to go in and check and set your units. When you do that, though, of course, and this should be obvious, but make sure everybody knows that you changed that. Come Monday, we're going international foot. Make sure everybody on your crew knows. Make sure everybody in the office knows. Make sure all of your consultants that are working on the project, they know, so that we don't run into any confusion going forward where one person changed it in the field but didn't tell the office. In your Civil 3D, you're also going to want to go and check your equipment databases. Your equipment databases basically replicate the configuration from your field equipment. And if you have gone through and set up whatever equipment you happen to be using for processing your data, you're going to have to set your units in there as well. So your equipment is going to have its own settings. Your equipment database is going to have to replicate those settings. So change it in the hardware, change it in the equipment database. As for your Civil 3D survey database settings, you will need to go through and change the default database setting values. As I mentioned earlier, if you're not aware of this, the survey database is an external database from your Civil 3D drawing. And any units you set, all those things I showed you earlier, in your Civil 3D as the file, will have no impact on the units of the survey database. So you want to go into your survey database settings, make sure you change that to international foot so that the database now has the same foot measurement as the drawing file does. And then kind of a good measure, once you get that changed, you might want to come on up here to the export these settings button and save that out to a file. And then you can distribute that amongst your team so that they can come through and import it with the next button. And then everybody's will get updated at the same time. So what about my current files? What about my current projects? Well, if the projects are done, don't do anything, leave them alone. That is a record of what was collected on that project at that time. So unless that project's getting restarted up again, you're redesigning it, or maybe even doing a project adjacent to it where you might want to import some of that data to help facilitate your design, that's the only time where you're going to need to address working with those old projects. I would not personally go through a huge effort of translating your archived projects just so that they're on the international foot. That would be a huge effort and probably a big headache and a big waste of time. As you go forward, if you bring in any of those older files as an insert or an XREF, they actually will be scaled. Remember that INS, the insertion units, they will scale them. And again, it's going to be such a minute value, you're really not even going to see it. But if you look at the insert XREF dialog box, once you select a file, it'll show you your scale factor for inserting this. And it's going to say 1, regardless whether it's a US survey foot or an international foot, it's going to say 1. And that's only because of truncating and rounding. If you were to go up into your units and crank up your precision really high and do it again, you might end up getting something that ends up saying, well, it's being inserted at 0.999998. That's just telling you there's that little minute difference. So wouldn't worry about that. Going forward, I would check with my approving agencies for timelines for rolling out this change. Some of them may not adopt it right away, and as long as you're in coordination with them, things are going to work out great. A lot of them are also probably going to offer grace periods where they slowly transition into that. And a lot of them I've seen actually do it based upon completion percentage. So say you're less than 30% vested in a project, unless it's a multi-year, huge, like 10-year project, a lot of them, those newer ones, they might tell you to reprocess the data in the new foot, but they might say, well, we're already at 50% or at 70%. They'll probably just let you continue on with the units you're in. You may not necessarily have to translate those files. But in the event that you do, well, then that's what you need to do, translate those files. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. You can translate your survey databases, your files themselves, lots of different things. So to translate your files, first things first, implement what you've learned today. Some of the stuff I've talked about, setting up your templates, your files, your units. Get all that stuff dialed in on your files. As it relates to the survey databases, again, that has its own settings, its own units, but there is a translate survey database tool inside Civil 3D. So you can very simply open up that translate survey database and choose one of your current survey points, one of your control points, determine what your mathematical value or difference is from one coordinate system or one unit measurement to the other. And you can actually translate, and it will move that database. And that's going to save you having to reprocess or re-import the initial raw data and then lose all of the adjustments and cleanup you may have done. That's just going to keep everything intact. It only takes a minute or two. Everything will get moved and repositioned, and you'll be good going forward. As for your drawing files, use the coordinate system transformation tool that was released in June. So if you go onto your Autodesk account, log in, and look at the software that you have available to you. You might need to toggle over to add-ons and updates section of your main products, but you will find the coordinate transformation tool for Civil 3D. Once you install that, it'll end up on your tool space inside your toolbox, and there's a handful of tools inside there that will actually let you translate your files from one coordinate system to another. Another really cool feature that they've included in there is actually vertical transformations too. So one tool will translate from one coordinate system to another. The other one will actually translate it vertically. And as you can see, it can go from US foot to international foot or vice versa. You also have the ability to create new coordinate systems if need be. Now remember, Civil 3D is written on top of Map 3D, which is a GIS application. And all of the coordinate systems that feed into Civil 3D are actually being populated from the Map 3D library. So you could switch workspaces, get into your Map 3D, and inside your coordinate library, choose the coordinate system you're currently using, choose duplicate and edit, and give it a new name like this coordinate system international foot, or some kind of a unique name. Apply the adjustment that needs to be applied and assign that to your drawing, and that will give you a new coordinate system with the new units. If you're not sure what that difference in value happens to be, if you go on the NGS website, they actually have a really nice coordinate conversion tool where you can actually go in and tell it whether you want to convert horizontally and vertically. They even have an XYZ version as well. And then you can tell it what type of coordinate system you want to transform onto, put in your project information, either Latin long or something. And you can also use the interactive map on the left-hand side where you can just navigate around and point to wherever your project is located. And it will give you those values and those differences, which might be really handy for you if you're going to create your own coordinate system or adjust that, which is pretty nice. So all these things I've talked about today, as you can see, there's a few, a pretty good amount of things that need to be done. It's not a huge endeavor. It's not going to take you all day to do these things. In fact, I'd be surprised if it took you more than an hour. But there are some kind of background features, background settings that you do need to know about. So those are some of the things that I wanted to shed some light on today. And so just to kind of quickly wrap up and review what we've gone over today. So we kind of talked about our main topic, what's happening in the deprecation of the US survey foot, and what it means, to you, why it's happening, and what the benefits are going to be of this new change. And I went through talking about how to update your Civil 3D templates, your styles and settings, your survey equipment, your Civil 3D database settings, and how to update your current files. So that being said, I'd like to open it up for any questions that may have come in. And I have a couple admins here that have been facilitating that. So we'll just check in and see if there are any questions that came in based upon this. And I'm not seeing much. So I'll give it just another minute. There is a questions panel in your meeting invite. If you have anything, feel free and post something in there. Otherwise, we will wrap. But if you didn't absorb and take notes on everything that I went over today, just know that at the conclusion of this, you will get a thank you email for participating in this with a link to the recording where you can come back and review the content once again. And as usual, I'm sure it'll probably be posted to the Microdesk YouTube page as well, so you can share that with your coworkers and colleagues. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions in here, so must have been all pretty straightforward. But I do appreciate everybody taking time out of your day. And if you know how to implement all of these changes, awesome. Feel free and do that. More power to you. If you don't know where all of these settings are and where to make all these adjustments and changes, feel free and reach out to us. You can go to microdesk.com. You can call us on our toll-free numbers or even email sales support. And if need be, we can answer any questions that may come up for you. We can even schedule some mentoring sessions where we can help you make these changes and implement them alongside with you, or whatever works out best for you. But I do appreciate everybody taking time out of your day today, and thank you for attending.